can hear me. So the reading is taken from John chapter 20, starting at verse 24, and it's Jesus appears to Thomas. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came in and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Right. I have my paper in order and, more importantly, I have an acetate. This helps. It was funny this morning, I was talking to Kev and to Ruth, and I was saying I was a bit nervous about doing this. So we were talking about it, and so Kev, I was talking about, but I think Kev suggested I wear a balaclava, and I thought, ooh, there's a shout. But then Kev goes, "But Neil, I'm not being funny. You're the only one around here that looks like a rugby player, so you'll stand out like a sore thumb." And then Ruth chips in to give me the real boost of confidence, and turns around and goes "Yeah, but also you sound quite distinctive. There's no point." I'm so I was great, I've got to do this on my own. So I was oh my life. It was very encouraging. Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Doff of a cap. Right, where are we? I saw Mark's talk, and I was watching that the other earlier this week, and so I was trying to work out how long I needed to talk for, what I need to do, and I thought Mark was like this. I've got this book and this book and this book. I'm oh my life, man. What is he doing? So I would just like to say thank you very much to Wikipedia and to artificial intelligence. It's amazing. If you type into artificial intelligence, please give me a sermon on John 20, 24 to 29. It's amazing what comes up. Apparently. Not that I know, but this is beside the point. I mean, so yeah, this is, as Mark said, I think, did you say lowbrow, highbrow? I think you said lowbrow, didn't you? So yeah, I'm following on in my esteemed colleague's footsteps. I mean, why is it easy to doubt? We do it our whole lives. Whether it's the girl you fancy, not that one, the one behind, or the Euros. Apparently there's a football tournament coming up shortly. I was unaware of this until about a week ago. But more importantly for me, the Lions tour is next year. Do we doubt and do we believe, and what is faith? I mean, obviously I want to smash the Australians completely. See, Fiona. Amen. Yeah. But it's also are we getting a new job? Whether, what do we deal with? I mean, I deal a lot with doubt at work. Whether the officer has committed the offence and should be disciplined or not. Often it's one person's word against another. I've literally got a case at the moment where I can't prove anything unless an Amazon driver comes forward and spills the beans, which I'm really going to struggle to track him down. But it's awkward. It's evidence is key. And evidence is what Thomas wanted, I think, in all of this. I mean, we all have different views on what is evidence. And I'm not going to bore you, but there are different kinds of evidence, and more of them carry more weight than others, etc., etc., etc. Mr. Pratt would probably slaughter me for chipping in, because he'll know better than I do. But evidence is what we want, and whether it's circumstantial, whether it's what we call real evidence, as in you're being caught, then it's one of them. And Thomas is all about that, and we call him doubting Thomas, as Barbara said, and she said that it was a mistake, and I'd sort of disagree with that, maybe. Sorry. I mean, yeah, really sorry. I mean, was it a mistake? Was it not a mistake? Yeah. But is it fair to call him doubting? Who is, are we all not doubting? We label Thomas with this badge, and he's very rarely mentioned in the Bible. He turns up 11 times, as I sort of said before. And so, a lot of the times he was simply there with his fellow disciples, just knocking around, going fishing, as you do. But he's the one that's that verse that Jeanette read beautifully, I might say. Yeah. That verse was, he gets labelled because of that. And I don't think that's necessarily fair. I mean, let's talk about Thomas. I mean, his name was, Thomas is an Aramaic word. It means Tioma, which means twin. And Didymus is also another word, but in Greek, that also means twin. But nowhere in the Bible does it mention any twin at all. So we have to take that on as it was. He was born in Galilee, and we don't know an awful lot about him. I mean, he really doesn't appear an awful lot and say an awful lot as what some of the other people do. But it seems to be, after the resurrection, he went as a missionary. There's some evidence to support this. And he went to Iran and to India. And then he eventually was martyred in a place called Mylapore, India. And he was killed with spears. So not great. And there are also churches in the Indian subcontinent, including the good Sri Lankan populace, who trace their origins back to St. Thomas, because he was actually down south, a bit more Tamil Nadu kind of place, which is obviously quite close to Sri Lanka. And he's also regarded as the patron saint of India. What's the patron saint of Sri Lanka? Why not? Right. Homework. I like giving homework out. Yeah, and what was that? Did you know the answer? Joseph. There you go. We like a bit of Joseph too. Thing is, when you start looking at where it does appear in the Bible, he rose from, when Jesus rose from the dead, he started showing himself to people, and he was very calculated about which way round he went about it. So he first of all goes to Mary, who simply replied, when he turned around and said, "Hi, Mary," she went, "Rabboni," which means teacher. So she was on board, and it was basically, go tell my brothers, which she did, and she was leading by example. We like a bit of Mary. But then it says in Luke 24, 9 to 11, when they came back from the tomb, they said all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. But they did not believe, the women, because their words seemed like nonsense. I would never dare say in my house that a woman's voice or views seems like nonsense. I mean, I'm not that stupid. But, oh my life, can you imagine? What gets me is should we not call them the doubting disciples? As a sweeping brush. All of these men have actually, there's a load of women turned up, and it's no, we're not going to go there. Because they're talking rubbish, they're talking nonsense. But were they? No, they weren't. What really gets me is this bit. Mary, the mother of James. So you've got a James in there, who's his mum's turned up and gone oh yeah, by the way, I've just seen Jesus. And he's no, you haven't. Who can you not believe? You can't believe your own mother. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Yeah, but the disciples being the disciples, but I'm going to call them the doubting disciples now, because they didn't believe them. But eventually, these disciples were hiding from the Jewish leaders, as they do, as they would have done at that time. And Jesus appeared to them. So they were overjoyed to see him, and then Jesus breathed the Holy Spirit into them. And so I said, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven. Now, all of a sudden, the disciples are oh yeah, actually, those women before were right. And this is where we were. Not actually, there's nothing that says, and I've Googled it and tried to find out, but no one knows why Thomas wasn't there. There's nothing in the Bible, there's nothing in any evidential sort of like sphere that I can find, and I'm sure there is something somewhere, but I couldn't find it about why Thomas wasn't there. I mean, maybe it was planned, maybe he was scared, or maybe there was a different plan. I mean, it says in John 11:16, then Thomas, known as Didymus, said to the rest of his disciples, let us go that we may die with him. So Thomas now is sort of like, he's been told, this is Jesus, and he's now actually willing to go and die for Jesus without any sort of like second hesitation. He's just like, right, okay, Jesus is going to die, therefore I'm going to go with him. That's showing an awful lot of faith and an awful lot of conviction in his belief. Yeah, and I don't see any of the other disciples, but from what I've been reading, doing similar. And then in John 14:15, it was like, Thomas said, Lord, we don't know where we're going, so how can we know the way? Jesus answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life, which we all know and trust. No one comes to the Father except through him, or through me. If you really know me, you'll know my Father as well. From now on, you do not know him, and you have not seen him. Philip then chips in, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. Jesus answered, do you not know me, Philip? Even after I've been amongst you such a long time, anyone who's seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show me the Father? Now this is a Gospel of John, and it's when Thomas is asking about Jesus, about his destination and a way to follow him, and Thomas expresses his ignorance and his disbelief about what's going on there. And he doesn't understand that Jesus is actually preparing a way for Thomas to follow along with other Christians. And Jesus is saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So like basically, get on board, because I am right. What gets me though is Philip. Philip says, Lord, you show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. So I'm now going to call him Doubting Philip. You know what I mean? Really? It's like Philip is saying the same sort of things that Thomas has been saying. You know, he's asking questions. He's sort of like reaching out and sort of like trying to ask why you are doing such a thing. And no one calls him Doubting Philip, but I will from now on. It's my thing to do. But maybe he's unsettled by Thomas. I mean, it's often the case when you're in a room with a load of people and you're having a meeting that the person with the loudest voice wins. And sort of like, there's a bit of a dejection there, and sort of like you can see the decision going against you as the decision being rubber stamped in the room. And yeah, and certainly in my house, I don't have that option, because like Jeanette is simply right. Yeah, and like it works quite well that way. Well, she's shaking her head at me, so maybe I'm wrong. Anyway. But people are risk averse, and they are, especially sometimes in leadership, whether that's at work, church, politics, and change is difficult to take. And we've got to understand that this is massive. Jesus is saying he is the way, the truth, and the life, which is though what Philip, Thomas, and all of them have been told before because of the Old Testament, and so like it'll happen, they're still questioning, even though they've got Jesus in the room, what they're doing. So like, they all want what is evidence. So Jesus eventually appears to Thomas, and we call him Didymus. He's one of the 12, as Jeanette wrote, and basically he's saying, I want to see the holes in your hand and the hole in your side. That helps. What gets me, though, is sort of like, Thomas is told by his friends and disciples that they've seen the Lord. So like, all of a sudden, Thomas has been told that, that they've seen him. All his mates, 11 of them, are saying, you wouldn't believe what happened the other day. You know, like, I've seen Jesus. I'm like, no, you've not. Really? Yeah, of course you have. No, I've not. You know, they're having this conversation, and sort of like, Jesus is there. And a week later, Jesus appears to 11 while they're hiding, and sort of like, he basically walks up to Thomas and says, put your finger here. Yeah, like, put your finger in my side. It's like, see what it feels like, sort of thing. And this is wacky. I mean, how many people would put their fingers in someone's side just because they're told to? But this is what Jesus is saying. But the thing is, this whole thing gives Thomas 2 big ticks for evidence gathering, which is sort of like where I come in. Yeah, basically, Jesus has said he's alive, which, yay, Jesus is alive. And secondly, the elephant in the room is like, he knew the criteria Thomas had set the week before. So Jesus is basically saying, look, see my hands, see my hands, see my side. Yeah, like, what do you want? You know, this is me. I am who I am. What more can you ask? Sorry, excuse me, I just missed my place. There's no proof, again, from various extensive research, and the internet's an absolute it's a rabbit hole. There's nothing that says whether Thomas did or did not put his hand in the side. The thing that I did find out, which made me laugh, was Catholics believe he did, yet Protestants believe he didn't. And I'm like, really? It doesn't actually matter. Yeah, the important thing is what Thomas said next, which was, my Lord and my God. Yeah, that's the important thing. But like, we still get hung up about, I mean, actually there's quite a lot on why Catholics said one thing and Protestants said another. And I'm like, I didn't even get into that. I just thought, this is just wacky. But like, what caused Thomas to doubting? Firstly, he's willing to go and die for Jesus. He's like, you know, as we've seen before in the Bible, you know, the earlier verses, he's like quite happily to go to Jerusalem and die for Jesus. But then he doesn't believe Jesus when he says, oh yeah, but I found you a route to go when you die, this pathway. He's like, oh no, you've not. But I'm still willing to go die for you in an earlier mention. But like, no, he wants to go up. And it don't make sense. When Jesus is alive and he's talking to him, this is the thing, Jesus is in the same room as this man, and he's still struggling with sort of like what to do. And if you can't believe Jesus, then who do we believe? You know, it's like, like fundamentalist, when we come to church, we read our Bibles, we sing our songs, we pay attention to vicar-type people with dog collars, and periodically, obviously. No, we wouldn't. Right, okay, scrub that bit. If you can scrub that from the recording, that'd be helpful. Thank you. You know, Jesus was there talking to this man, and he's still doubting. So what hope do we have? You know, if Jesus was here now and he was like, here's my hands, here's my side, would we all want to like go stick our fingers in his side and sort of like, you know, sort of like look at his hands? I doubt it very much, because we know who Jesus is. So we need to sort of like move on. But like, Thomas was having a bit of a wobble. But he does, doesn't he, our Thomas? What I do love about Thomas, I mean, I've really got to, over those like 2 days, I've got to know him a bit, kind of thing. And I love the fact that he wants evidence. What he wants is a fait accompli. And I've put the Reverend Hanson caught in the library with a candlestick. But like, no Reverend Hanson to sort of like, at least for him to like look a bit awkward, but yeah. But he's asking the questions that everyone might want to ask. And why do we badge him with this doubting thing? You know, he's asking, Jesus, can you actually give me a bit of context here? And certainly from a work point of view, I love context. I like a timeline as well, ironically. Timelines are good. But we want context, and we don't get that. You know, like, Thomas is still like, not sure, scratching his beard. Don't know whether he had a beard, actually. I've seen lots of photos, but... yeah, it's weird. But yeah. Reverend Hanson, dodgy. Don't trust him. He might be in we need a candlestick. Certainly if you don't see him with a candlestick, anyway. We make evidences like factual decisions. We all need them. We all use them. We all trade them. We make decisions on what house we buy, what car we buy, even what groceries we get, so like who we marry, where we go to church, where we work. But a lot of that you base on what you know and what you've learned and what you've researched. Timing, sorry. And certainly in my world, that's an absolute must. As I said before, I love evidence. Without it, I would basically waste my time. But what does Thomas want? To be honest, I'm not sure. Is it so that he can clearly articulate his message when Jesus is resurrected and dies and resurrected? I mean, it's far easier to turn around and say, "Hey up, Jesus, thank you very much. I've seen you, I've talked to you, I've seen your risen thing." So maybe that was the plan all along. And maybe Jesus knew that Thomas needed that additional support, that additional sort of like gratification, logic, evidence, just so like, because Jesus knew Thomas was going to Iran or India, obviously again subjective, depending on what evidence you look at, but he definitely went somewhere. So Jesus knew that, and maybe Jesus knew that, sort of like he wanted that and needed that in order so he could turn around and sort of like evangelize. Because we all need different things for our evangelizing. Some people need it sort of like a little bit. Some people sort of like are quite comfortable with sort of like what they do and how they say it, but some people aren't comfortable at all. So Thomas was in that bracket. So I mean, I'm quite pleased with that. I'm into using the dictionary at work so you can get to the point. So sometimes I've turned around to like job holders and said, "What do you think sexism means?" And I've got the Oxford English Dictionary, because that's the only one you can use really, kind of thing. And I've sort of said what they think and what I think. But I've looked at doubt, and doubt is a feeling of uncertainty or a lack of conviction. Now the thing is, does Thomas really doubt? Does he lack conviction? I mean, he was willing to go like die for Jesus sort of like 4 or 5 passages ago. So does he lack that conviction? Does he not want more? But he does have uncertainty. But then don't we all? Sorry, one second. Oh, we all have uncertainty and we all have questions. And if we didn't have questions, then what are we doing here? You know, like, why do we come and listen to Barbara, Dave, Mark, Kev, other people that are talking, when we don't have those questions? We want those questions, and it's good to have those questions, and it's sort of like nice to have that sort of like, to get that greater understanding, because with the greater understanding, then we can actually move forward in our faith. I think doubt is necessary because it strengthens us and it makes us think about what is the actual issue, what is the problem, what is the question that Jesus, Jeanette, work, Mark, Barbara is asking us. You know, it's good to know what we're talking about. And the thing is, John's telling us this story that we need faith. And I think that's what the key thing is about this sort of like this passage, that we need faith and we need to sort of like understand what Jesus is trying to tell Thomas and like what Thomas is sort of like understanding. And Thomas was was struggling with why Jesus would return. We don't know what sort of person Thomas was. Was he a half empty or half sort of like full kind of guy? You know, that's the other thing that we don't know. We've got these 12 disciples that were sort of like set on this massive pedestal, but they'll all have their own insecurities, they'll all have their own foibles and sort of like their own worries and their own issues. So maybe Thomas was someone who just needed something a bit more evidential. You know, and also, what dynamic did these disciples have? I mean, they didn't believe the women, so like again, doubting disciples. You know, so like, what are we doing? But like, sometimes we all need somebody to stand up and sort of say, what you know, the elephant in the room, I want to ask that question, I don't want to ask that question, I want to see what people say. But like, Thomas is doing that. He's basically asking the question that probably a lot of the other disciples wanted to know, but were too scared or too worried or to ask. We don't know that. And the question here is, do we need doubt to strengthen our faith? I mean, I would say that we do. And I'd argue that doubt is absolutely very, very necessary for us to strengthen our faith. Yes, by reading the Bible, by listening and learning, we can move forwards. And also, when we're talking to non-Christians, invariably, they'll give us their doubts. So, like, we've got to sort of, like, challenge that and sort of, like, nicely, obviously, and sort of, like, discuss why they have those doubts. But that's actually really good for us, because it gives us as well, like, well, this person thinks this. That's a fair point. You know, that's actually, oh, I've not thought of it that way. And that means that we've actually got to, like, think, actually, but our faith says we believe in Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. And that person doesn't. But like, hopefully by what we're saying and what we're dealing with, they'll actually learn from that, and maybe we will learn too. And the thing is, we need to show and shine our faith with our own doubts. And this means we come across as normal. I know it's one thing that Dave said when I was actually not coerced, bullied, whatever, to come here. Encouraging words and a text. That's the polite way of putting it. But we all have our doubts, and so like we have to shine through that and so like jump in feet first. And at the end of the day, it's only Jesus who's perfect. The rest of us leave a lot to be desired. You know, we have, well, we do, don't we? You know, we all put our hands up, like, who has doubt, who has insecurities. It's like, yeah, I'm there. No one else put their hands up. I noticed that. Yikes. And the thing is, we started this series with Mr. Holloway over there. So I'm going to close with a quote from him, and I'll say a bit more after that. I'm sorry. Sorry. I did say sorry, didn't I? Yeah. Right, but Kev said, you may feel that you're alone in your faith, fearful that no one else is a Christian where you are, but maybe they are, and maybe it'll take you standing out to encourage others to do the same. That's what he said. I know that because I had to like pause it and rewind it and all that sort of thing, so like on the video. But does that not make sense? You know, so like what kept saying there is like we may think we're alone, but we're not. You know, other people are there, and we're standing out. We want to encourage people to do what they say. And I thought that's quite good. That I quoted it, you know. And the thing is, as a new or even old Christians, I mean, I still consider myself a new Christian because I've only been at this for 20 years, which I know is quite modern for a lot of you lot, but I still consider myself a new Christian. And would it not be unreasonable for all to have questions like Thomas? You know, we don't know the whole story. We've not read everything that we could. But what we have here is Thomas. He's still in the inner circle. God had a plan for him. He knew, spoke, and broke bread with Jesus, which we all love to do. But he still had doubts and concerns. So the thing is, does not that make Thomas someone that we can all relate to? You know, we all can relate to Thomas because we all must have those doubts. And sometimes a leap of faith is all that is required to change your and other life. So I'd say, jump in feet first, smiling, but with that doubt on your back in a rucksack. With regards to Thomas, despite the limited mentions in the Bible, I think he's more influential than we think. And I actually think we should give him a medal. You know, it's like pin it on his chest and sort of go like, well done you. Because he was the one talking about stuff that we didn't want to, like he was challenging Jesus of all people, but he's still unsure. So I'm willing to give him a medal. And the thing is, we don't call the other disciples doubting Mark, doubting Luke, but like doubting James. He didn't even believe his own mother. But we do with Thomas. So I think we should stop calling him doubting Thomas and call him Saint Thomas. Amen. That was me, sorry. I'm now finished.
Very much, Neil.